from Multicultural New South Wales, but very, very importantly, as I said before, our multicultural media who join us here this morning. We've undertaken quite a bit of feedback together with you over the past 12 months, especially in regards to our awards. And I just want to brush very, very briefly on our new awards structure that will happen this year, because we've gained valuable feedback from you, and that's exactly what I intended to do, to find out what you wanted to make out of these awards. So, very importantly, this year, myself and the Premier will be hosting the Premier's Multicultural Communications Awards. And what we will be doing, we will be combining our Multicultural Media Awards and our Multicultural Marketing Awards into the one awards. We took on board the feedback that you gave us. We think there are direct similarities in relation to those awards. We think we can provide a much better event, and we certainly intend to do that. So that is how the awards will be structured this year, the Premier's Multicultural Communications Awards. On the back of that, award nominations open in June this year, and in regards to the categories have also been altered, and I'm very, very proud to announce that on the back of the categories there will also be recognition awards, because the one thing that I do want to do is ensure that I acknowledge the efforts of every person who is involved with multicultural media, regardless of how large the organisation is or how small the organisation is. Because we know that some of these are mum and dad publications, and some of them have vast amounts of funding. Even sadly, some have government funding. I shouldn't say sadly. But we just want to ensure, because you all play a vital role in communicating to our culturally diverse communities, and there are very important messages from government that we need to disseminate through our communities, and we know, and you know, that your communities specifically read your publications, watch your TV, listen to your radio. It has a huge amount of depth right across the communities, and so we just want to ensure that we are doing everything we can, one, to help disseminate that information through your various outlets, but also recognising you for the work that you undertake, and we will certainly do that. So nominations will open in June. On the back of that, in regards to the categories, we will be opening up our offices at Multicultural New South Wales in Parramatta under our very, very good Chairman, Dr. Harry Haranath, and we will be going through and explaining all of those categories on behalf of those awards for anyone who is interested in the future, and we can give you a few more details about that today. So that's our awards, and we're very, very proud of that, because, as I said before, we've listened to you and we've taken that on board, and these are your awards, and so you've helped restructure these awards. I'll just put that to the side, because whilst we get very, very close to a new and exciting budget on behalf of New South Wales, there are some things that have happened that carry over from our last budget that have helped create 500,000 jobs in New South Wales since we were elected in 2011. And you know, and I know, on behalf of our communities, that there is nothing more important than our communities, our parents, our mums and our dads having a job. And so to be able to reach that 500,000 milestone is something that we are incredibly proud of. The majority of those jobs have also been undertaken by ladies, by female participation, and also a very, very strong growth in employment right across our rural and regional areas. And we also know how diverse our rural and regional areas are becoming. So it's good news for our entire New South Wales community. So that is one of the takeaway points. In terms of our investment in schools, some $4.2 billion being invested in thousands of new classrooms on behalf of new and embellished 1,200 new and embellished schools right across this state, in order to accommodate the 8,500 new enrolments each and every year for New South Wales. Further good news for our communities. Something as we age is our health needs. $4.9 billion in the current budget on behalf of our growth in hospitals, especially across Western Sydney. $1 billion investment into Westmead Hospital, which is currently underway. $1 billion of investment into Nepean Hospital, which is also currently underway. $700 million into investment into Blacktown Hospital. So in those very, very important hubs where we have that richness of our cultural diversity, Western Sydney really is the beating heart of multiculturalism. As our communities age, their requirement for health will continue to grow, and so we have adapted and we have provided for that particular growth. And on the back of that, just ensuring that as the 13,000 new people that have been able to access a new home under our strategies, such as the removal of stamp duty, providing housing is one thing, having a job is so very, very important, but it's about what we are creating on behalf of our communities. So a $100 million investment into our green space, into our environment, into our local parks, into our playing fields. Because regardless of what we build, we know we want to be able to relax on the weekend. We know we want to go out and have a wonderful cultural festival, of which, as you know, I attend every week on behalf of our many, many thriving communities. But we need those spaces to be special spaces for our community, so a further investment on behalf of the quality of life. That's just some of the flow over things, and we've got some information for you and some releases, but it is important information for the community. And we know that you are the best way to disseminate that message and those communications on behalf of our multicultural communities. Ladies and gentlemen, that is about all that I have to say. That's some of the good news. We're incredibly excited about the awards, and we look forward to the awards, and importantly, we look forward to your nominations. But as usual, we are here and our door remains open to you all the time. If you need any information, if you need support, if you need access, we are there, and you know that you can contact us at any time. So please avail yourselves of our hospitality, but before I go, if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them while we're here.
Tim Burrows from the media marketing website Umbrella. What do you think about the importance of communities? What are the factors that actually create a community?
Well, I think there are. When you say what creates a community, I mean, you could easily say, a number of families living in a particular area, it is a community. But importantly, and I think this is what differs Australia to other countries, is that we are so diverse, and yet we are so cohesive. And that's something that we can never ever take for granted. That's something we need to work at each and every day. But you look across the board at the early growth of migration, because Australia, there are two stories in Australia. There is our oldest culture, our Indigenous culture, which is one of the oldest cultures in the world, dating back some 50,000 to 60,000 years, and then there's migration. And that is the two stories of Australia. So you look at the story of migration, you look at the areas where migrants have established themselves, and they have grown, their families have grown, their connections have grown, and people are drawn to those particular areas. And we're seeing that now right across our rural and regional areas. And I could pick out the strong influence of African nationalities now being located in the Wagga region. I could look at the growth in the Nepalese community growing in Albury. You're starting to see these strong influences of different nationalities because the regions have so much to offer. And I think this is very, very important. And the one thing that they do have to offer is good employment. And Wagga at this point in time has an employment rate below 3%. And that's repeated right across those areas. So there is a great need for employees. There's a great opportunity, wealth of jobs in those regions at this point in time. And so whenever I talk to people, especially with our refugees and our new migrant friends, I say don't forget to look at a rural and regional area, because it's a wonderful way to get your foot on the ladder, not only in employment, but the opportunities to purchase a home, the opportunities to rent an affordable home, a brand new 3-bedroom home on a large block of land in Wagga you can purchase at the moment for $350,000. You can't buy a garden shed in Sydney for $350,000. So it just gives you the really great advantages to being able to get your foot on the ladder, to establish yourself in a wonderful community. But when you look at those particular areas, they've got great universities, they have wonderful hospitals. I mean, our investment in hospitals, which is so important, because as our people age, regardless of what our communities and the diversity of our communities, they look for those important structures. So I think this is my short answer to what builds a great community. I think one, in essence, the resilience of people to move to a country like Australia, to then roll up their sleeves, to work hard on behalf of themselves, their families, and then their communities, backed in, importantly, by a government that, one, recognises the wealth that we have, the richness of our diversity, which we do, and also recognising the benefits of that diversity. I mean, we don't just acknowledge our diversity here in New South Wales predominantly, we celebrate it, and we know that it places us at a very unique advantage. And this is why we have made such a strong investment into our community language schools. We know that if our community is bilingual and multilingual, that places us at a great advantage, especially from a global context. So, sorry if that's a long-winded what makes a great community, but no one has done it better than the migrant families that have moved to this country and that have established themselves here and just create wonderful, strong communities. But I think cohesive communities. But it is something that is a work in progress that we always need to never be complacent about. That we need to continue to encourage that harmony right across the board. No wonder there's no other questions after that one. There is.
Yeah, I mean, immigration is rather a federal issue, but in New South Wales, like Liberal or Labor, I don't see you don't have any long-term population goal, or especially regarding for housing issue. Do you have any population or policy? Or?
Look, I think the Premier made a wonderful comment a couple of weeks ago in a speech, which she quite correctly said. As a daughter of migrant parents, as she is, she supports migration, as we all do. But the important thing about migration, from our perspective, when you are a state government, when you have to build the hospitals, the schools, the roads, the public transport, we should have a say in that continual growth of our country. I think very importantly, and I think that's fair to say on behalf of all states. I think we whilst the federal government considers and puts in place what our growth is going to be, what the size of our migration is going to be, I think state governments should have a seat at that table, just exactly like the Premier said, because we are the ones that will have to deal with the growth closer to home and provide the supporting infrastructure. And so if we are starting to see our traffic increase, if we are starting to see constraints on public transport or waiting lists grow in hospital, I mean, that is all a result of growth, and it is how you deal with growth. So I completely support the Premier in saying that we would love to sit and discuss that with the federal government for the future. And I think that is a very proactive response that she's made.
You mentioned the housing crisis in Sydney just before. Why don't you consider a fast train from Sydney to Newcastle? You can lessen the burden of the housing and population issue altogether. All other countries doing the same thing, but in New South Wales, in Australia, we just talking about 40, 50 years, just talking, but never done anything. Just recently, similar to a second Sydney airport. Very fast train. I mean, in Australia, considering the geography and economic structure, we definitely did that kind of thing especially from Sydney to north and Sydney to south. We can solve a lot of issues.
I think I agree with you in terms of the fast train linkages and the opportunities between, say, a Newcastle and a Goulburn. I think that is better because I think it then opens up your corridors. If you look at the growth in the north and southwest of metropolitan Sydney, that we are now going back and reinvesting into important public transport links of the Northwest Metro and the Southwest Metro. I mean, ultimately those lines should have been put in 20 years ago to accommodate for that growth. But ultimately you are starting to see the benefits of that growth around those strategically placed rail lines. It would be exactly the same if we did for instance, did a fast train between Newcastle and a fast train between Goulburn. I think any further than that, I think when you can jump on a plane these days and fly to Brisbane for $99 and jump off the plane and do your business and jump back on and get back in an hour, I think maybe those fast train links are going to have a lot of competition, but I definitely think between the likes of the Goulburns down south and up north for Newcastle, and maybe when I say Goulburn, maybe the Illawarra and Goulburn, something that I think that opens up great opportunities. But they are conversations that will have to be had together with our federal counterparts. And as the Premier quite correctly said, if we know what our growth is going to be in numbers, we should be sitting with our federal counterparts for exactly the same reasons as Mr Turnbull and our Premier have come out and announced the north-south rail line on behalf of Badgerys Creek. I mean, that airport is going to be opened, in the next within the next decade, and so ultimately you're going to need public transport links. So we've been able to sit at the table, and also together with local government. So there are 8 strategic local government areas that have invested in that as well, who will be beneficiaries but will absorb that particular growth. That's a great way to plan. When you've got all 3 levels of government sitting together, that's exactly what the Premier is saying in terms and on behalf of our growth in the future, that we should have a seat at the table.
Minister?
In the past, you've talked about the importance of government and government agency providing support through advertising in multicultural media, and we see that ever increasing. I mean, the affairs of government is being advertised will you continue that support for multicultural media?
Yeah, absolutely, Felice. I mean, we see it as being absolutely vital. I think it's fair to say that, and this is just a personal reflection, that our culturally diverse communities tend not to grasp mainstream media. Maybe a little bit sometimes passes them by, and they really do look for those particular media outlets that are in their native tongue, in their native language. But it's a little bit more personal, isn't it, multicultural media? It's very, very genuine, and it's very, very personal. And that's why I say, and I would say this, that it is far better read and absorbed than what I would say our essentially the 9s, the 7s, the 10s, even the ABC to some degree. It's much more personal, and so that means that you can touch more people, which is exactly what our multicultural media does. So will we continue to support that in the future? Absolutely.
Minister, firstly, thank you very much for this briefing and sharing your knowledge. I love what's written up there. Knowledge is the mother of wisdom and virtue. Up there.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad you can read that.
We have a few minutes to work it out. So, a couple of questions. Number one, there has been a call to stage the Commonwealth Games in Western Sydney in 2026-2030. What are your views on that? And do you think that timeline is realistic and workable?
Look, I think once again I draw on the comments of the Premier. This is the greatest state in the greatest country in the world. We all know that. I don't have to tell you people. We love this state, and we are certainly going to keep our eye on any opportunities that we can grasp to continue to grow this great state. We're just about to enter. I might be giving something away, but we're going to do a little bit of a prelude to Vivid tonight, where we are going to look at some of the opportunities we're creating to encourage greater inclusion on behalf of Vivid. Has everybody come to Sydney to see Vivid? I mean, on a cold and wintry night in Sydney, there's not a lot that attracts you to it, but those wonderful scenes that are just painted across these great structures, like the Sydney Opera House and some of our buildings, the Conservatorium are in. It's just wonderful. And you talk about it, there are millions and millions of people from across this state that come to see Vivid. That was something that was started, and I don't think anybody really grasped how huge it would be. And so we've continued to grow that. Now there are calls to continue Vivid out into Western Sydney. I'll certainly put my hand up and say we'll happily have some Vivid in Parramatta. I think that'd be a wonderful place to start. I just think it's grasping those opportunities. I mean, you always have to keep an open mind to when opportunity presents itself. So would we look at the Commonwealth Games? Would we look at Formula One? We look at anything that we can, that encourages more people to come to this country. And we are going through a tourism boom at this point in time. I mean, this is one place that people around the world want to visit. And I'll tell you one reason why I believe that is the case. When you look across our cultural diversity, when you look at the fact that our population is the sum total of every nationality around the world, what do you think our people are saying to their family and friends around the world? That this is the greatest place on earth, and perhaps you should come and visit sometime. I think the greatest encouragement to tourism is our own people, our own citizens from various backgrounds who invite and encourage people to visit the country. And I imagine that is one of the great reasons why our tourism is flourishing at the moment.
So within that timeline, is that realistic?
I don't know. I mean, I'd leave that up to wiser heads than me, even though we're sitting under this dome of wisdom. I'll leave that up to wiser heads. But one thing, we will never shut the door on opportunity in New South Wales. If there's an opportunity there and we can embrace it, I'm sure our government will grab it with both hands.
Minister, sorry, my second follow-up question is pivoting back to what you had started the conference with, the Multicultural Communications Award this year. When we last met, there was a rather robust discussion, and I understand that this time it's competition and recognition. That's a category which you're looking at on an overall basis. In terms of competition, we had discussed about the juggernaut, certain media organizations with budgets of $780 million, which is SBS, is comparing with the Mums and Dads. In the same competitive category, do you still see the same play field happening, or are there some changes being announced after this?
There's some changes that are being announced after this. we think we've landed in a really nice place. We think everyone will be like I say, we want to recognise everyone across the board, but we've taken on board all of that robust feedback that we've received, and I think we've landed in a good place.
A couple of weeks ago in Ryde area, about 10 racially motivated posters or stickers were on there. Do you have any comment on that issue?
Yes, disgraceful. Disgraceful. Summed up perfectly by the local member, who came out very, very strongly on social media and condemned any form of racism, as I certainly do. Absolutely disgraceful. It's something that will never be tolerated in this country. And like I say, when we talk about the harmony, we talk about our cohesive communities, we can never sit back and take that for granted, because we know that there are people who will seek to divide us in the community. It will never be accepted, and it needs to be stamped out, and it needs to be spoken out about. The standards we walk past are the standards that we accept, and we will never ever walk past racism. Certainly not on behalf of this state, given that this was the first parliament that adapted, acknowledged multicultural principles within legislation in this country. So we're proud of that. We stand by that legislation, when we certainly stand by our support and equal opportunities for every person, regardless of background. Please eat, drink, be merry, and come and see us, ask questions, get photos. But thanks again, and don't forget to nominate in June.